And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host Laraib. As we are here to break down Week 10 of the NFL season. We are already past the midway point of the season. So much to get into. It's our first Tuesday episode in a few weeks, so we're excited to get down, actually start breaking down some football before we start predicting it. But before we break down football, we have to get into those predictions, Rob. Let's just say the past few weeks haven't been that interesting, but you want to go ahead and introduce it?
Yeah, let me go ahead and pull them up for you guys. Back-to-back weeks where we have a tie. And sometimes that's just how it goes, right? We both picked both of our locks hit, neither of our upsets hit. We disagreed on two games, and it just turns out that one hit and the other one didn't hit for me, and now we're looking at a tie. And 9 points for each. Maybe not the greatest outing by either of us, but still, some games go here and there in the middle of the season. So I'm still up 2 games on you. And so midway through the season, I'm feeling real good.
I mean, both are locks. Those are two sweat fests right there. And yeah, I mean, I liked Arizona. I think the Jets are a bad football team. They proved me right. But at the same time, I went ahead and I picked the Commanders. That was a game to the very end. Pittsburgh pulled it out. Give them credit where credit's due. But I felt good about that week, and I feel like I'm starting to get a better grasp on this season. I know a huge win is upcoming, Lara. But let's go ahead and let's move on to Week 10, starting with last night's game, Laura. We had Monday Night Football, Rams going down to the Dolphins at home. Pretty underrated beatdown. I mean, neither of us expected this. We both picked the Rams to beat the Dolphins last night. Rams were hot. They just won, I think it was 4 in a row. Now they're hosting the Dolphins going across the nation. Sean McVay with prep time. We always, give him a lot of credit in these situations. But man, their offense just looked really, really putrid. And they have their guys back. Not all of their offensive line. They're still missing Havenstein at right tackle, who's pretty big for them. But overall, I mean, you have Cooper, you have Puka. Kyron Williams been there all season. He's been productive. You have your studs offensively. And let's be honest, Laura, even against Seattle last week, their offense wasn't that good. Geno Smith just gave the game away on an awful pick six, and then the fourth down decision. But this offense has really been stuck in the mud for a while. What is contributing to this just offensive sputtering?
I think it's been the run game. I know you mentioned Kyron Williams has been there all year long. He's been very productive in the passing game. And what I've seen from him rushing the ball the last 2 weeks, he kind of just gets stuck in the mud between the tackles. There's just not much space for him there. And it really slows it down for this offense, right? You get in those second and long, third and longs, and, it's a little bit too much for Matthew Stafford to overcome. And it's not really a bad reflection on Stafford. It's just been a lot of pressure on his face, a lot of penalties moving them backwards, and it's just been a tough task for them. And it is very alarming from a team, who pulled off a couple wins in a row and thought, we can try to make a push to win the NFC West. And we'll talk about some of these teams' path to the playoffs, but I think there's going to be one team coming from the NFC West in the playoffs, and I think it's only going to be that division winner. And so it just means a lot more when you lose a game like this. No, it's against the AFC opponent, but still in a spot where you're at home with all your guys. I think this was a huge loss for them.
And think about the desperate situation the Rams were in just 3 weeks ago when they were sitting at 1-4, and it seemed like their season might just be over. And then they rattle off 3 straight wins. They're back to 4-4. And then to drop this game right here, it's just disappointing because both of us really like a lot of the pieces on this Rams team. And for them to just drop just a complete dud on Monday Night Football was really shocking. And it does, like you mentioned, it really hurts their odds come playoff time because this NFC is just loaded with teams vying for those wild card spots. And I agree with you, Laura. But I think only one team from this division will make the playoffs, and that's whoever wins the division. I think it's that competitive, and I don't think that you're going to get enough wins to make a wild card spot, especially competing with the Cardinals and 49ers and even those Seahawks who are still hanging in their balance. But I
No,
want to I want
no.
to flip this over. Hey, you never know. DK Metcalf getting healthy week by week. Um I want to flip this over now to the Dolphins side of things. When Tua went out, it seemed like their season was over. Not a single win without Tua, but he comes back last week. He looks really solid, I guess you could say, against the Bills. They have a chance to win that game, but Tyler Bass hits a 60-yard field goal to beat the Dolphins. But then they come out, on the road, give them a lot of credit here, and they win a super just impressive game, especially defensively. Coming into this game, this Dolphins defense 31st in the NFL in pressures, but it just seemed like they were in Matt Stafford's face all game long. Give guys like Zach Sealer a lot of credit. He was out last week against the Bills, but he really does make a huge difference. He had a huge batted ball in the end of that game to really, put the pressure on Stafford in these long down and distances. But this is just a tough team, man, and they showed a lot of their chops. And Tua, he just finds a way to convert these third downs, like these critical third and mediums. You need to get it. And I was really impressed by Rams go down, the kick a field goal to make it a one-score game. And the Dolphins just find a way to get into field goal range, continue to stiff arm the Rams, get a field goal of their own, and really put the game away. And that was a lot just on Tua, hanging in the pocket, finding all the weapons he has on the outside. And it's a shame the injury because this is a playoff caliber team. And this is probably the most impressive win they've had in the past 2 seasons. They're not a team that, plays up to competition. They don't do well in prime time against good defenses. But, against a underrated Rams defense, which is getting better and better by every week, I think he played really well. And there's still a shot, Laraib. There's still a shot. But we'll get into that. What are your thoughts on the Dolphins win?
Yeah, I was really impressed with that defense. The offense really came out to a hot start, a quick 10-point lead, but it was that defense that we talked about that really slowed down the rushing attack and Matthew Stafford. And so a lot of credit to them on that front. And we'll talk about this a little bit, but they do have a great shot to continue pushing if that defense continues to play like that. If they, start making some turnovers like they had in that game, they have a really good shot. And especially when the offense really isn't clicking that well, Tyreek Hill gets in the end zone, but Jalen Waddle really missing for most of the night besides that first drive. And so it really relied on some of the other guys, Washington on a jet sweep to take to the end zone. Jonathan Brooks came in for a couple plays to relieve Achane. And so they have the pieces and they, pick up a good win here. They're not out of it yet, Lewis.
They are not. But let's go ahead and talk about what it is, Laraib. And that is going to be the 2024-2025 NFL playoffs. We're right there, Laraib. We're about to get into real, late November, December football where these games start to get nitty gritty. You're playing a lot of divisional games. And these teams, it's now starting to really crystallize who's legit, who's not. And these games are going to get extremely intense as we go forward. But let's go ahead and let's just look at this playoff picture, Laura. Let's start here with the division leaders. I'll tell you the current division leaders. And you just give me one that you think will either change or is going to have a tough time holding on. So currently in the AFC, we have Kansas City in the AFC West. We have Buffalo in the AFC East, Pittsburgh in the AFC North, Houston, AFC South. And then in the NFC, we have the Lions. In the NFC North, we have the Eagles in the NFC East, Falcons in the NFC South, and the Arizona Cardinals in the NFC West. So out of those 8 teams, Laura, which division and which team has the shakiest path to keep that hold?
I think we can all agree it's the Arizona Cardinals, one game ahead of the 49ers, but I also want to mention the Steelers, one less loss than the Ravens. And so it's really those two divisions I think we're going to be spending most of our time on. We see a team like the Bills. We see, we'll talk about the Dolphins having a shot. That's through the wild card. The Bills have locked up their division. Metaphysically speaking or metaphorically speaking. Then of course the Chiefs undefeated right now with their Chiefs magic. They got that locked up. The Texans, 2-game slide. I think they lost 3 out of the last 4. They still have that division on lockdown. The Eagles Commanders, that's definitely one we will be talking about, especially after this Thursday night game. And then for the North, the Vikings still 1 game out, but, not really playing to that same level that they were earlier in the season. So immediately just comes down to the NFC West and the AFC East. We'll see what those teams are doing.
Yeah, I want to particularly highlight the AFC North that you mentioned, Laraib. The Steelers currently leading, but Baltimore right there behind them with one extra loss because they played an extra game. And these two teams, and we'll get into our next episode, but they do play this upcoming week. And I want to say, Laraib, even if Pittsburgh isn't the winner of this division, I just think Baltimore has a ton of talent. They have the current league MVP, reigning MVP, and honestly, the favorite to win this year's MVP in Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry's been balling out, but their defense is shaky. And this Steelers team, even if they don't win the division, which, I feel like won't be that much of an indictment because their schedule is brutal coming forward. I think they've been playing very good football going into Washington last week. And it looked like, you were really outgaining. You looked like you were outplaying but the Commanders last week, but it was just some self-inflicted penalties. You fumble in the red zone. But then to come back, Russell Wilson with his patent moon ball to Mike Williams, newly acquired from the woe-begotten Jets, to put them over, and then that defense making a huge stand in the 2-minute drill to stop the Commanders. That was really impressive, Laraab. And I haven't seen this much juice from a Steelers offense really since the Big Ben days. I think Russell Wilson. Now, I don't want to say he's back to his Seattle form because I just think that player's gone. But can he just play that type of football? He's not trying to play in an offense that he's trying to be something that he's not with Sean Payton or Nathaniel Hackett. I think that Arthur Smith has done a really good job of recognizing Russ's strengths and saying, you're a down the field guy. You need a good run game to complement the deep play action and to complement your style of bootlegs, getting out of the pocket, making things happen. And it's really helped this offense. George Pickens looks like he's finally getting unlocked to be that higher echelon receiver a lot of us thought he had the ability to become. And this offense really shaping into form. Jalen Warren, Najee Harris doing a great job on the ground. This offensive line really shaping into form. And I have faith in this offense, Laurent. And it's weird because this Pittsburgh Steelers team the past few years, it's just been this dominant defense, but this offense, you just could never really have faith in them in these big games. But if Russ maintains this level of play, I don't know, Laurent. I don't know what the ceiling of this team is. I really do like their chances to not only be a division contender, to be a conference contender. What do you think?
Think you're aiming a little bit too high for a team
Okay.
like this.
Talk me off the
I
ledge.
just don't think they stack up to the Bills of the world or the Ravens of the world. I know you talk about this Ravens defense not being, the world beaters so far, but I just think there's a ceiling, there's a cap on this team that you can very easily tell for the Steelers. You
And
know,
you're saying the cap is Russ?
Yes, the
Okay.
quarterback is the most important position on the field, and out of the other guys with Mahomes, Jackson, and Mahomes or Allen, he just doesn't come up to that standard. And so when you're talking about a team going deep in a playoff run, where it's like, all right, we're down 10 late in the fourth quarter, we got to score quick and get the ball back. Maybe they do kick a field goal and then their defense gets a stop, but do you trust him to go down the field late in December, January? Russell Wilson, can he do it? I think it's really gonna be telling, Lewis, based on that schedule. Still, like you mentioned, still have to play the Ravens twice. He's played the Eagles later on this year. He still have to play the Browns. They have a
The
tough,
Chiefs.
tough schedule ahead of them. And so that's really what's going to show and really going to, give us an idea of who's going to win this division and who's going to be good in December, January time.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the NFC West as well. I mean, that is just a true like up for grabs division. All the teams are really within 2 games of each other, still vying for that division title, even your Seahawks, who are still in it. And currently, even though the Cardinals have a win over the 49ers, literally, and in the win column, they have one win better. The 49ers are still the favorites to win this division. Is that how you lean?
And it's really tough to tell, Lewis, especially with the way this 49ers team has been playing. Just sloppy football on both sides, and then special teams has been really bad, and those
Awful.
come back to haunt you. Those bad special teams plays, a missed field goal here in the playoffs really, really can mess up your entire season. Meanwhile, the Cardinals, have racked up 4 wins in a row now against some quality teams. Your Chicago Bears, my Los Angeles Chargers. But there's still a lot of football to go. The Cardinals still, I would say they have the easier schedule. They play the Seahawks twice. They get to play the Patriots and the Panthers. But still a couple of divisional games. This is going to be really, really tight down to the wire, especially when you look at the 49ers who still have to play the Packers and the Bills and the Lions. I really feel like this Cardinals team has a shot. And I know I look goofy right now after my prediction of last week saying, the 49ers are on, their Super Bowl run again this year. But the
And you picked the Jets to
Cardinals
beat the Cardinals, but go on.
and the Cardinals they are in really good position.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jonathan Gannon has done such a good job in just transforming this defense into a legitimate playoff level defense. Laura, you've just seen how they've been clobbering opponents the past few weeks. And it's not with your household names. It's really just kind of like a whole unit buying in, just selling out. And they do have some ugly losses, on their schedule. That blowout loss to the Commanders, blowout loss to the Packers. But on the same token, they beat San Francisco already. They've
In
beaten
San
the
Francisco as
Rams.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just look at their schedule going forward, and I really do think the Cardinals, they have a lot of favorable matchups still to go on their schedule, and they could make a push here. Whereas, I'm going to be honest with you, Laraib, this San Francisco team, just overall vibes, is just down for me. Like we even see in the game against Tampa Bay, this Tampa team, we both thought it was going to be a blowout. Tampa just played Monday Night Football against the Chiefs, really hard overtime loss, and now immediate turnaround to play the 49ers, who getting Christian McCaffrey back. You'd assume this would be a big, 49ers midseason. Let's just stuff a team in the locker and let's keep going forward. But it was just, you had Debo and the kicker and the long snapper getting into it on the sidelines. It was just really weird vibes in general. Obviously, Ayuk out for the year. And this defense just been up and down all season long. And the special teams, I mean, you look at the best teams, the Chiefs, who just find ways to win all 3 phases of football. They block a kick to beat the Broncos, and just say, who else besides the Chiefs? Meanwhile, the 49ers, now, these type of situations, I feel like they always struggle with. What I will say about the 49ers is we've seen this before from this team. The past few years, 9 games in. Last year, 5-4. The year before that, 6-3. Year before that, 4-5. Year before that, 5-4. They've kind of, and now, they're currently sitting at 4-5. They're, excuse me, right? They're 4-5. Did I get that correct?
5-4.
5-4. So they're kind of where they've been the past few years. And if you expect that late push where they just out physical, out tough teams, Dre Greenlaw, big news. He's starting to enter the practice window for a potential return soon. And we know how big he is for that linebacking core and that defense in general. So that could be a huge addition for this defense, along with getting Christian McCaffrey back. And it seems like if we can start getting these guys healthy, but you mentioned some of their opponents, it's going to be tough. I feel like there's real test for this 49ers team. Credit to them for playing as bad as they did. They did get the win in Tampa last week. So now some time to readjust, reset. Let's get back on course and let's see where we go from here. I think it's going to be super compelling. Any Rams, any Seahawks, any chance?
I think I've sold all my stocks on those 2 teams. Just, a really bad loss for the Rams, like we already talked about. And for the Seahawks, I mean, rookie head coach, maybe not, your defense really not what it was supposed to be this season. And so it's just too big of a climb for the Seahawks team and for the Rams team, especially where they're at now. Can you cross them off definitively? No, a lot of late season shenanigans can happen, but I just feel like they just don't live up to what these 2 other teams have in terms of firepower and the way they've just been playing right now.
Cardinals play at Seattle next week. That's going to be a really interesting game to toss up some feathers in this division for sure. But let's go ahead. I want to look at the wild card race in both of these conferences, Laura, because it's really a tale of two different stories here. Going into the season, we thought the AFC was the superior conference top to bottom. They have the higher echelon teams, the bigger marquee quarterbacks of that nature. But looking at just the win losses here, it's pretty a stark difference in both conferences. It looks like in the AFC, 9-7, 9-7 could really get you to where exactly you need to be in terms of a wild card berth. Whereas if you don't have 10 wins in the NFC, you're SOL. So let's focus here on the AFC. Can we lock in? Can you lock in any playoff teams right now?
Wild card teams. I'm ready to put my flag down, Lewis. My Los Angeles Chargers are going to be in the 2024 NFL playoffs. I feel confident in that pick. They still have a couple tough games coming up. The Bengals this week, they still have to play the Chiefs again. But the way they've been playing football, my Seahawks were supposed to have an identity change this offseason. It really looks like the Chargers stole that from them. They've really established both sides of both, trenches. Gus Edwards came back off of IR. Him and J.K. Dobbins look fantastic running the ball. And that's going to be huge for this team when you talk about taking things off of Justin Herbert's shoulders and also being able to put away games. I really like the way this Chargers defense has been playing. Now, they've been injury riddled the past couple of years. We've seen guys like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa always be injured. But I really feel like this is the year they start to put things together piece by piece and they make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, underrated kind of identity change for the Chargers. You mentioned identity. It's really been to start the year. It was heavy J.K. Dobbins, heavy running game. The rookie offensive linemen, just emphasis on tough nosed football. And Justin Herbert kind of took a back seat to the Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman style of just rough it up offense. But now I think they're opening up the offense a lot more for Herbert. He's looked a lot more comfortable, really getting a good connection with guys like McConkey. Quentin Johnson in his second year has almost flipped his identity for me. I mean, he's looked pretty solid so far this season. And then just airing it out a lot more because we're talking about Justin Herbert here. We're talking about a guy who, broke the rookie passing record, as a rookie. So, I mean, he clearly has the talent. He's displayed that over the years. He just needed to find the right partner as a coach to, lead him in the right direction. I feel like we're starting to get a lot of, needless to say, I think I agree with you. And I think we can both agree the Steelers are in a prime position to make the playoffs as well. Would we agree there?
Yeah. If we don't, I think, yeah, the Ravens or the Steelers, whichever one of those teams loses their division, I feel like they have a really, they're going to be in the playoffs.
So the 4 division winners we feel confident about, and we feel confident about the Chargers and the Steelers. That leaves one playoff spot remaining, Laraib. Who do you think takes it? And who are some teams on the outside who you think could have a sneaky chance to take it as well?
Well, I think we already discussed this, and I think we might agree. The Denver Broncos with rookie quarterback Bo Nix played very well the last couple of weeks, and they have a really solid schedule going forward. The Colts are right behind them, and I told you when we talked about this, what might have been 3 or 4 weeks ago, this team is not going to make the playoffs, Lewis. And since then, they've won a whole 0 football games, and I think that trend is going to continue going into next week and maybe the rest of the season. So the Colts are not on my docket, but the same 2 teams I talked about last time, the Bengals and the Dolphins, are still right there. The Dolphins, great win for them on Monday Night Football. And for the Bengals, just continuing to not have the ball go their way in these close games. There's just a sense that, okay, if this could, just one thing can go their way the rest of season in a couple of these games, they'll be right there. But it's really, really tough looking at some of the teams that have to play versus who the Broncos have to play.
Yeah, I think we can both agree the highest ceiling belongs to the Bengals. But they've just dug themselves such a large hole that they have to climb out of, and their schedule is not forgiving going forward. You still play the Steelers twice. You still have tough games on the road that I just don't feel too comfortable with. Meanwhile, the Broncos, who, already have a win over in the win column, he had 2 wins over the Dolphins at 3 wins, and you have 1 win over the Bengals who have 4 wins. That's, Broncos hitting at 5, obviously. And here's the Broncos' remaining schedule, because I think this is interesting. Home against the Falcons. That's going to be a tough game. I think that's going to be a really interesting game this upcoming week. We will get into that. I believe the Broncos are a slight favorite since I last looked at it. But then you have games at the Raiders, home against the Browns, home against the Colts, 2 tough games at the Chargers, at the Bengals. But then what I think is the biggest thing for this team, and what looks like on paper, a home game against the Chiefs, that's impossible. That's a really tough game. What do you mean? But week 18, there is no shot, the way the Chiefs season is going, that they won't already have the 1 seed, best record in the NFL, all locked up by then. And there's definitely the division, no shot about that. And there's no reason why Mahomes or some of these, playoff savvy, playoff experienced veterans would play in that game. So that's almost a free win. So I can get to, if we beat the Falcons, beat the Browns, beat the Colts at home, and win that Chiefs game, you're sitting at 9 wins. So can you go ahead? Can you beat the Raiders on the road? Can you split the Chargers Bengals games? If you can, that's 11 wins for this Broncos team, and I think that locks them into the playoffs, Laraib.
Yeah, and throughout the season, I've really been mentioning, this Bengals, their schedule really opens up in the latter half. It's really going to get easy for them. And that was 2 games against the Steelers, who last year they were able to dominate. But that just has not been the case this year. Those 2 games against the Steelers are going to be absolute dogfights the way they've been playing offensively. And then, it's looking real tough for them. Now they do play the Broncos the second to last week of the season, and that could be the game that decides who's making it, who's not making it. Because also the Steelers, who the Bengals play week 18, they could also say, we have the 5th seed wrapped up. We're gonna, start sitting a bunch of our guys as well. So it's gonna be real tough for them. But I think it really comes down to that week 17 against the Broncos, who really wants it more. And I just feel like, oh man, this is gonna be magical what we're about to witness from some of these AFC teams trying to conjure up some voodoo to sneak into the playoffs. I can't wait.
So it sounds like you're leaning the Dolphins here.
And then my Dolphins with Tyreek Hill and Tua.
Oh,
It's just that's also a team where, they're 2 games back. We're only 10 weeks to the season. We still got a long way to go, right? But you can just envision them putting up a couple stinkers here and there, and you can just close the case on that one. So I'm not going to completely rule them out just yet, but they have a really tough climb out of there too.
yeah, and then they still have 2 games. They still have games against the 49ers, at the Packers, and already sitting at 7 losses. It's going to be really, or 6 losses, excuse me. I don't think 9-8. I mean, it could, but that would mean the Broncos and the Bengals really have to stumble as well. So you need a lot of help from the outside. The Dolphins definitely do not control their destiny here. So just, I do believe in them. I think they're a playoff caliber team with Tua healthy, but we'll see going forward. I think they're going to have some very exciting football games the remainder of the season. And then quickly, let's move ahead to the NFC. A lot more clear of a picture here in terms of the teams, a smaller sample of teams that we're looking at here. It's really a 1-8 at the moment, with Detroit, Philly, Atlanta, pretty much all being locks for their division. Even if the Lions don't win the division, it seems like it's and the Eagles as well. Both those teams are in very good positions to still make the playoffs. And you look at a team like the Vikings at 7-2, the Commanders at 7-3, the Packers at 6-3. And then, when you look at outside the playoff picture, right now, the only team with a positive record is the 49ers at 5-4. And I feel like it'll just be them and the Cardinals vying for the division and not necessarily a wild card berth. So is there any team outside of those top 8 that you think could have a chance making it in?
I mean, your Bears. They fired Shane Waldron this morning. Maybe they turned things around, right? Because that defense has still been playing really good football. They get thrashed by the Patriots, but they didn't let up 20 points, the defense. Now the Cardinals, of course, put up ran it up on them, but that defense is still a solid unit overall. And so you think, we bring in a new offensive coordinator, see how fast Williams can figure it out. But with Matt Eberflus as the head coach, I just think there's way too much turmoil in the building. All those players kind of it just seems to have given up on, on the entire coaching staff. And so it's just a big climb for them. And then, the Rams with Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, you can't, rule them out entirely. But for those teams, it just kind of seems like it might be a little bit too much to try to get in.
Yeah, I mean, between the two of us, I've been known to be the bigger Bears fan this season. I picked them a lot this season, and I've had a lot of, I put a lot on what my reputation and what I believed in Caleb Williams, and I took some bullets, and I'll be the one to tell you right now, Laraib, they are not making the damn playoffs. You said this defense is playing better. Not really. They're getting stomped by bad teams, bad offenses. Drake May thoroughly outplayed Caleb last week. And, an offensive coordinator change. Can you point to any example in history or a midseason offensive coordinator change was the spark a team needed to go on a run? No, it's just not the case. This team is spiraling downwards, just throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. I'm not a fan. I think this team needs a total reset. And they're doing a good roster wrong with a lot of these front office decisions, coaching decisions. That I think needs a serious tooling in the offseason. The team that I would look at on the outside is the Rams, like you mentioned. I just think like it's so Rams to lose a game when they're finally hot, they're finally feeling good about themselves. To then, I don't know, wouldn't it be just such a Rams thing to do to then win 3 in a row, be 8-5, and it's like, oh, there's the Rams, back at it. The thing that hurts them is the losses to some of these teams above them. Lost to the Packers, a loss to the Cardinals already. They did beat the 49ers already, but they do play again, including a game against the Cardinals. But that would be a team on the outside just because of the talent. And we didn't really talk about it in the Monday Night Football recap, but I really did like their defense. I think this young defensive line is super intimidating. I think they did a really good job stopping the run game for the Dolphins and getting good pressure on Tua. And I think that is something that will translate further into the season. This offense just needs to figure it out. And when you have Sean McVay and Matt Stafford, that's something that I can put good belief that if there's any offense that can figure out, it's those two guys. So do I love their chances? No. But out of that field, I'm definitely going with the Rams.
Now, I want to quickly talk about a team who's currently in, who has 7 wins, who I think may not make it, and that's the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh.
Darnold is officially on pumpkin watch after putting up 12 points against the Jaguars. And the one case that's a big case, right? Sam Darnold is just not playing good football at the moment, and they could fall out. But then you look at that schedule, man. They play the Titans. They still have to play the Bears twice. And they get to play the Seahawks. And so they have a lot of winnable games on their schedule. But they're certainly a team that I'm circling for when they do, or if they make the playoffs, could easily just get trounced as soon as the playoffs start, as soon as they start. But besides that, I mean, we're looking at a team like the Packers who, kind of sneakily have a really hard schedule, Lewis. I mean, they play the 49ers. The Dolphins are playing good. They have to play the Lions still.
The Saints.
The Saints
Coach
on
Riz.
there. Coach Rizzy.
Uh-oh.
No, what were we saying last week? New head coach alert. And then the Vikings are on there too. So they have a tough schedule going forward, but I really feel like they're in good position. The Commanders, they lose this week. Maybe they lose to the Eagles, and maybe we see a team like that start to spiral, especially when they were punching above their weight so far throughout the season. But this NFC West, or the NFC in general, I think is going to be really close coming down to the wire.
And then quickly, one last thing I want to hit on in terms of just playoff picture is the number 1 seed. Because, now that we've expanded to 7 teams in each for the playoffs, now it's only the number 1 seed who gets to bye. So it's really in the favor of that team to clinch that 1 seed. Currently, it's the Chiefs in the AFC, Lions in the NFC. Do you see any movement in those conferences, any changes for those 2 1 seeds? And what is the advantage this season that you think will really favor the winner of the 1 seed?
I think the Chiefs really could use, I mean, every team could use it, but especially the Chiefs, right? You talk about back to back Super Bowls that they've won. Think about how much football they've played than everyone else, right? Going into February, 2 seasons in a row. Now you're trying to make another deep playoff push. I think having that week off is going to be huge for them if they get it. The Bills, of course, right there, they play against each other this week. And if they win that game, I think they would be in a really good spot to get it as well. And then on the other side, I think um, a home field advantage throughout the entire playoffs. I think that's going to be huge for the Lions if they get that.
Yes.
We talk about Jared Goff's numbers, indoors versus outdoors. If it goes through Detroit, you feel like they're almost unstoppable at home, right? If they play that 49ers game from last year in Detroit, you really very feel like they could have been in that Super Bowl against the Chiefs. So that's a huge spot for them. Again, you think about some of these teams with these huge, home crowd advantages. A team like the Eagles, maybe their fans aren't the biggest fans of their head coach, but that's just a huge advantage to be playing in Philadelphia throughout the playoffs. And so those are like the 4 teams I'm really looking at.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, especially for the Lions, and you brought it up, the fact that they get to play all these games late, January, these cold, hard weather games where we've seen Jared Goff really stumble. And even in a dome last week, he throws 5 interceptions. He's prone to have
Hey, the roof was
bad games.
open.
The roof was open in NRG. So Houston this time of year, I hear, is very brisk, as some might call it. Some people are actually leaving to go to Pennsylvania at this time of year. I don't know why. But I just think it's a huge advantage for them playing in front of that crowd. We saw the emotion, just the juice that crowd gave them last year. It'll be so much fun for them to continue the home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And the way it's shaken up, Laraib, Chiefs, Lions, I don't know. I'm not going to make a Super Bowl pick right now, but that's the way I'm leaning. And it's looking like if these 2 teams get the 1 seed, given their just dominance this season and how they perform at home, it'd be really hard to bet against them. So these teams on the outside looking in for the 1 seed, the Bills, the Eagles, hell, even the Ravens and the Steelers still have a shot, even though the Ravens a little less because of the head-to-head against Kansas City. The Steelers, they still play Kansas City. So if they, pull off an impressive stretch here, they could have a 1 seed, and playing at Pittsburgh late in the year, not an easy place to play. So I think those are some interesting teams to look out for, but Chiefs Lions a pretty easy bet for the number 1 seed.
Yeah, but before we close off, let's get into Thursday night football here. Starting off week 11, we have the Washington Commanders coming off a loss to the Steelers last week, going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles, and the Eagles are favored by 3.5 points. And this is a huge game for these 2 teams trying to win their division here. The Cowboys, Giants thoroughly out of the race. It really comes down to these 2 teams, and the Eagles at home, who've had some, they've won a couple games in a row now, maybe not against the greatest opponents, but that defense playing very well. Saquon looking like the addition of the offseason and the fantasy steal of this season as well. And then the Commanders, really turned around their season, playing fantastic football up to this point. But I'm really feeling the Eagles in this one. This just feels like a spot for me where the Commanders, they've had a solid season so far, but now they're facing up against a team in the Eagles who've been to the playoffs, who've been to the Super Bowl, who have all their guys healthy and playing football. The defense has been outstanding. I just think this is a huge spot for the Eagles.
Yeah, it's hard not to agree with you. You make a lot of good points. The only thing I will bring up is this Eagles schedule where they really haven't, they've had impressive wins. They've taken care of business. But what scares me in this matchup is just Nick Sirianni at home. Now they're
The
on a
fans are
5-game
booing
winning
at him.
streak. It's a tough, close game. He decides to go for it on 4th and 3, and then it's just like, shoot, what are you doing? And that's going to be our fear for every big Eagles game this season. And they really haven't been tested yet. So, with some adversity coming for them and a good team in Washington who's really on the rise, I think this is a tough spot for the Eagles. And I really have liked this Washington defense. I still don't know if Lattimore is going to make his debut for the Commanders, still dealing with a hamstring. That would be huge in this game against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith as some extra back, because if there's one player who loves playing the Commanders, it is A.J. Brown, feasting on guys like St. Juste on the outside. So getting a guy like Marshawn for this game could really swing things. Um, and I'm leaning Commanders here, Laraib. Think Jaden, to lose 2 games in a row and just have a stark flip from 7-2 to 7-4, where it's like, are the same old Commanders? But these are not the same old Commanders. New coach Dan Quinn's gonna have them ready, and I just honestly feels like a coaching mismatch here, Laraib. I think the combo of Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be a lot for the combo of Sirianni, Fangio, Kellen Moore. So I really do like this Commanders team, and I think they can prove a huge challenge. And this is a good play in the Eagles. Eagles, adversity, let's see you prove it. I'm going with the Commanders and a tough win on the road, 23 to Eagles 20.
I think we both agree this is going to be a fantastic game on Thursday Night Football, but I'm going with the home team. I just think they're more experienced. I think Kellen Moore is going to have something for that Commanders defense in this one. St. Juste, watch out for A.J. Brown, tutty
Come
ball in
on,
this one.
Marshawn.
Saquon Barkley, go ahead and get 3
Oh,
tutties for me in fantasy, my
Frankie
boy.
Louvu,
Let me
not letting that happen.
let me get the Eagles 30-27.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you so much if you made it this far. So much stuff that we discussed and not nearly enough. So we will be back here tomorrow, maybe. We'll have to see based on schedules and everything to give our picks for week 11. So please stay tuned for that, as there are some huge matchups this upcoming week. Some of them we already alluded to in terms of what they mean for the playoff picture going forward. So stay tuned for that. But Rob, you want to say anything before we get out of here?
No, I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.